I want to transition us a little bit into a new topic that's more top of mind for all of us around the world, and that is the COVID pandemic that we're dealing with. There was an early study that came out looking at some of the effects already that COVID has been having on new and small business activity. They found that between February and April of this year, the number of business owners in the United States declined by 3.3 million. This is the largest drop on record. And another survey I saw just this week, over a quarter of business owners said that they have considered closing their business permanently due to COVID. Meanwhile, you look at the stock market, for example, a lot of big established businesses seem to be doing relatively well. What needs to happen to save, to support, to strengthen these new and small businesses during a really particularly challenging and unprecedented time?
So based on the nature of the work that the Rural Center has been leading, not just in the advocacy arm, which is where I spend a lot of my time, but also on the lending side as well. And I came up with 3 words, right? So listen, learn, and do, right? So listening to what new and small entrepreneurs and small business owners are saying they need and what they don't need, right? I think with that goes an opportunity to really directly connect those folks, entrepreneurs rather, to our policymakers. And we are trying our best at the Rural Center to do that, just that. And thank you to the foundation for your support in that effort. And I would say the learning aspect of it really is around tracking, monitoring, and learning from what has worked and being able to replicate that. It's almost like a statewide kind of case study, right? So can we serve as a repository for those type of case studies and examples so that people can have a model or approach to kind of learn from? And then lastly, I would say do. And for me, that really means advocating for the policies that will help and fighting against those that have been a hindrance to our rural entrepreneurs across the state. And I would just say, quite honestly, access to capital. Now, we know that in light of COVID-19, there are some really dire immediate needs. So addressing those most immediately in ways that allow them to really get back on their feet. In ways that allows them to really sustain and maintain their businesses over time. And in fact, that's exactly what the Rural Center is doing in partnership with a number of CDFIs across the state, that we've launched and are administering a statewide, what we call Rapid Recovery Loan Program. And so giving those folks a chance to get back on their feet. But what also comes with that is technical assistance and support, right? So through the loan application process, also through the business planning process. And this is for existing businesses here in North Carolina. So I think those, to me, are appropriate equation for how to help right now.
One of the things that we've increasingly heard over the last few months at the Kauffman Foundation, that in particular, is we've engaged in conversations with policymakers and entrepreneurs around the Paycheck Protection Program for all of the trouble that was associated with its rollout. What was often overlooked, but it came up in the conversations, was the issue you just mentioned, Brandy, which was the technical assistance. You think about the larger businesses, and for Paycheck Protection Program, 500 or fewer was the eligibility criteria. Now, a business with 499 people is much different than a business with 19 or 9 or 2, right? But they're all lumped together, competing in some sense for access to these funds. If you're a business with 499 people, you likely have accountants, lawyers, a whole infrastructure that allows you to navigate that bureaucracy, those rules. You have the relationships with the banks that you can tap into to get easier access to those relief funds. Meanwhile, a sole proprietor, the small business owner with a few employees, doesn't have that same amount of resources. And I think that's where the technical assistance providers, the entrepreneur support organizations, really come in and can play a critical role in helping folks navigate that process. Stacy, from your perspective, any particular policies, things that you and Institute for Local Self-Reliance would point to right now in the current time as needed to strengthen new and small businesses?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's really sort of extraordinary and troubling what we're seeing out there. One of the things that's really striking that we're seeing in this moment is how, we're seeing these amazing stories of how entrepreneurs are adapting to this moment. And it's really testament to the strength of small businesses and entrepreneurs. I mean, I've just talked to so many who've done really creative things to meet the needs of their community, and have often pivoted on a dime to be able to do that, whether it's like manufacturing entirely different kinds of products to meet personal protective equipment or whatever it may be, hand sanitizers. I talked to a florist who, in the time of being completely shut down, had come up with a really innovative business where she was delivering to customers who called or ordered online buckets of flowers and stems and so on. And you could then download a little video where she would show you how to arrange them. And she in particular had made some for kids. And so it became a way for families to have activities for their kids at home and for her to keep her business going. And there's just so many stories of that sort of illustrate the way in which we are more resilient as a society if we have more small businesses that can help us pivot when we have these kinds of challenges. But at the same time, it's also just troubling to realize how much the sort of broader structures of our society have put small businesses in a place where they're operating so close to the edge that a challenge like this can just push them right off. We have just released a report, cataloged a bunch of different approaches that we've seen that are working well. And we organized it in 3 pieces. One is first, next, and later. And first being, just as Brandy said, the urgent need for financial assistance to get through this period. And while nobody but the federal government has the full power to provide at the scale that's needed, it's still remarkable that local governments have, by our estimate, marshaled somewhere between $5 and $10 billion very quickly to inject into small businesses, and often in more creative and more effective ways than the federal government. So that's sort of some of the stuff on the first front. On the next front is, how do you help businesses pivot and adjust to all of the new operational challenges now? And we've profiled some interesting programs, for example, that are helping businesses to get online and to be able to sell through that kind of means, as well as a number of other strategies. And then the later is sort of, once you've done that, taking this opportunity, and I do think this is the one silver lining of this, which is that people are suddenly much more aware of how much small businesses matter. And so we've really been pushing to say, this is a moment to reevaluate your policies broadly and to think about what are the structural changes we want to make so that we have a stronger small business sector going forward. And it's things like, how do we strengthen community banks? How do we look at how our zoning law might be getting in the way of entrepreneurs? The one last thing I'll say is, as we think about these structural issues, one of the things that's been so troubling about watching the business fallout is that it has overwhelmingly affected Black and Latino-owned businesses. And so dealing with the structural racism that's built into all of these systems has got to be part of how we think about that structural shift.
I want to dig a little bit deeper on these challenges for entrepreneurs of color, in particular Black entrepreneurs. Before that, I want to pick up also on what you identified as a silver lining, that policymakers across the board are paying attention now to the needs and new and small businesses in a way that I don't think has been the case for quite some time. Brandy, that advocacy work that your organization, and I know Stacy, your organization is involved in as well, is just so critical now that policymakers are hearing from entrepreneurs, from business owners, to talk about, yes, what are the needs right now, the short-term, immediate challenges and the help that's needed, but also how do we rebuild better? The Kauffman Foundation just a few months ago took the framework of America's New Business Plan, and we released a COVID-19 response, which we did call Rebuilding Better, that looks at both the short-term ways in which policy can help entrepreneurs, and then what are the longer-term solutions that we need to create a more level playing field for all entrepreneurs. If you listen to some economists, those that take a very macro level view of the economy will say that perhaps it's not such a bad thing if we have some businesses close. Those businesses maybe were the ones that they weren't strong enough. They weren't efficient as other businesses. And when those businesses close, new businesses that are more innovative or have a better product will pop up in their place. And that churn is actually like good or helpful overall for the economy. We know many new businesses don't make it past the first few years. How do we distinguish between that natural shedding and then what we're seeing now, which is the potential, like needless loss and closure of businesses because of this extraordinary health crisis that we're in?
The counter to that would be a loss is a loss, right? And I think particularly for our rural communities, any loss in a business is definitely a loss, obviously, to the economy, right? And so for our rural communities, literally every dollar and every cent matters. And so what we would hope, and one can only hope, that if a business does cease to exist, that a new one or several new ones actually pop up. How can we guarantee that that's the case if we're not doing the work to ensure that that will actually happen? How are we incentivizing new startups and new businesses for that to be the case? Two examples that come to mind for me are two really good friends of mine who unfortunately lost their employment as a result of the pandemic. And, fortunately, they were able to get unemployment benefits, but it really allowed them a chance. And I think it motivated them to almost think about, wow, my income, my family's income really hinges on someone else. And how do I take that power and give it back to myself and to my own family, right? And so one of them, she has really great skills, and she decided to start her own residential and commercial cleaning business. And I'm super proud of her for taking that leap, and her business is really booming. And the other, same thing happened. And, for her, it was, what am I good at? I love to talk to people. I'm really good with my hands. And so she actually started a business, AV equipment, maintenance and repair business. And that's really booming for the both of them. While I think there's definitely a lot of unfortunate regarding the pandemic, it has allowed people who otherwise wouldn't have had really the mental space and capacity to take a step back and really look at how they can pivot, where the opportunities to shift. And they both are in a rural community. And because of where I'm placed right now, I was able to share with them, are you all aware there's small business centers at our area community college? You can work with them to help you with your business plan. And so I'm glad I was able to provide that knowledge to them, but it's not the same case for everyone.
For a long time, we had an economy that had a mix of small and large businesses, and there's a place for both. They perform different kinds of functions. But we have been, in recent decades, living in one in which more and more of the activity is concentrated in a few very big firms, and we have fewer and fewer small businesses. And so what we're actually seeing is a lack of the kind of dynamism that I think that sort of economic analysis is trying to refer to. Certainly there are businesses that fail because of inherent weaknesses or shifts in the market that are what they are. But I think that we often mistakenly look at the failure of a business with a kind of ideological, you could almost say, framework. Like we've all been, in some respects, trained to believe that small businesses are inefficient and ineffective, and we might be nostalgic for the local pharmacy, but they really can't compete in this day and age. But what we found in a lot of our research is that small businesses are actually quite competitive in many sectors, and that they provide like these very distinct benefits within their industries, just on a straight up, economic basis, and, on top of all of the kind of community benefits that we've been talking about. And that more often than not, it is these sort of structural barriers that work against them and sort of advantage their bigger competitors that are responsible for that. And I do think that you're right that the pandemic has opened a lot of people's eyes, and a lot of people have realized how much more important small business is. I mean, a lot of people think it's kind of marginal, but as Brandy pointed out, in North Carolina, I think you said it was 44% of employment. And we have lots of evidence of their role in innovation and all kinds of things that people sort of thought of as, oh, small business, nice to have, but not necessary. And I think we're all kind of realizing, no, very necessary. And there's some things that we need to fix going forward.